Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Eddie, for that introduction. Just to verify, everybody sees my screen? Good. Okay, so I want to start with this is kind of a quote from a newspaper article from South Africa, just so we see the scope of hybridity seems to be everywhere, and the reason I like this is because one of the officials was saying, well, actually, one thing we learned from Corona is that we don't really need to have all the students in the campus. And in fact, for large courses, it might be more efficient for them to stay at home, or for some of the students to stay at home, for some of them to come to the class, maybe have small sessions or tutorials in small groups, and then larger sessions in online. And so everybody's talking about hybridity, but actually, we hear a lot of word about hybrid, blended, network, high flex, if you've heard about that, connected, active learning, seamless learning, the whole mishmash of different concepts and words, and it's kind of hard to make sense of all this. So I want to start with the definition. The hybrid, the dictionary definition of hybrid is essentially when you take two things of different species, different breeds, and create something different, something new, an offspring of two animals, or a person who kind of blends two diverse cultures. In learning, in e-learning, this is Trenton's definition of 2015, says that hybridity is created by the movement of users who carry portable devices. So it seems to be a focus on the technology, on the mobility and the always on, always connected property that are afforded by technology. But Jesse Stonewall takes it in a very different direction, so more poetic, I would say, and looking at what happens when these two things, which are seemingly disjoint or in opposition to each other, get into some sort of conversation, some sort of interaction between them. And so it's about a dynamic process where things change, things are not completely clear. I think Haley Norgard and Anne stated more clearly even, or more precisely, and said that we are actually seeing an erosion of the distinction between online and offline, also the distinction between teacher, student, formal, informal, and all these hybridities actually create, as I said, a fusion of two breeds which seem to be disjoint, and now create something new. And that new is also, it forces us to question the way we do things, question our assumptions and practices. And so hybrid is not just a mix of online and offline, digital and analog. We take two, here I take a plum and a peach, I create a nectarine, which preserves some of the qualities of the different of the original species, but actually it's something new. So we're talking about blurring the boundaries between physical and virtual spaces, formal, informal, human and artificial intelligence, secondary and tertiary education, students and teachers. All these erosions create disruptive educational experiences. I want to summarize with the distinction between blended, which means essentially we're mixing different media. High flex, in case you've heard about high flex, it's about providing access to students, whether they're able to arrive at the class or whether they access remotely or whether they even access asynchronously. So it's really more about the mode of access. And hybridity is about finding these synergies between different contexts. In a sense, not just about bringing us to the students wherever, whenever they are, but also bringing them with the whole context that they have around them into the classroom and making some sense of that, making use of that synergy between different contexts. But this talk is titled Orchestrating and Designing, or designing and orchestrating for hybrid learning. And what do we mean by that? Well, so here I want to refer to Lee Schumann's concept of signature pedagogies. And the idea about signature pedagogy, it's a way to encapsulate the way we teach in a particular profession, in a particular setting. In this case, we're looking for signature pedagogies for hybrid learning. And the idea is that, essentially we're organizing our work, our activity in a system of practice. And this system of practice involves our values, our beliefs, norms, patterns of action in particular circumstances. In this case, we're talking about a system of practice of teaching, in the post-corona world, and that's becoming more and more hybrid. So it's signature pedagogy is usually, as a way I kind of conceptualize it, is by thinking in terms of, first of all, the high level, what Schumann calls the implicit structure of the vision and values that guide us. And there's from these we derive design principles, and from these we derive the actual practices that we use in work. So I'll start with the vision of values. And, if you think about the vision, so we're preparing people for a very different world in terms of the way they work, the way they interact. This is just a kind of some projections from the World Economic Forum about, the kind of tasks that humans will be doing and machines will be doing by 2025. That's not that far away, right? And we see there's really a change in the way that we're going to conduct our life, but also a change in our relations with machines. So in the way, another aspect of hybridity. Likewise, when we look at what are the relative importance of different skills for the future. So if we look at the things in terms of the way we prepare people for their work life, I think I derive these values, which for me are kind of the guiding values for when I design hybrid learning situations. So first of all, learning needs to be connected, and by that I mean connected in itself, but also connected to the real world, connected to the learner's real world, grounded in their real world, allowing them to bring their experiences from the world into the classroom, developing their critical perspective in terms of both in terms of critical discourse, but also critical of the world as it is. Once they're critical of the world, then they become concerned and they want to make a change in the world. And then it's our job to empower them, to make them
Shai?
understand that they have the capacity, kind of guiding values. Yes? Sorry? Ellie?
You freeze for a minute, but continue.
Sorry. Yeah, so from these values, I derive design principles. Design principles are what I call actionable imperatives derived from the theory and then and validated empirically. I'll go through just some examples, and you can go through these later again. For instance, these come from the Educational Design Principles database, the idea of making thinking visible, giving people, students the possibility to express not just the outputs of their work, but also the process of how they thought, how they reached conclusion, how they investigated the topic, building their capacity for autonomous lifelong learning. So again, I'm not teaching them content, I'm teaching them how to learn so that they continue learning without my help later. Related to that is building prompts for planning and monitoring into the learning and teaching sequence, and engaging learners as critics of their own work, of their peers' work, of my work. Right? This comes from a different angle, from the theory of pedagogy, And the idea is that these principles, for instance, that we define learning contracts with the students. This again relates to the fact that students are coming from very different contexts, very different learning environments, and what is right for one student might not be right for the other. So we give them the autonomy, we empower them to define their learning contract with us. We create flexible curriculum and let the student lead the lesson through their questions. Also, that eventually applies. Assessment needs to be also negotiated with the students. And finally, this is a set from of principles from a paper which I was one of the co-authors. We had the idea of the zone of possibility, of thinking in terms of what is possible in a learning environment, working within that zone, support knowledge building discourse within the community of learners, looking for a 50-50 partnership. In this case, it was about partnership between humans and machines in the learning process. You can also think of the partnership between learners and teachers as a 50-50 partnership. So again, but all these principles still seem a bit abstract, and then we need to put them into practice. Instead of getting into the whole theory of design pattern, which I normally use, I'll just give a few examples, not from courses that I necessarily ran, but this is from an article in Hybrid Pedagogy, and it describes a methodology where the lecturer gives students an assignment which is essentially asks them to participate in a conversation in a public medium, in this case in Twitter. So rather than write an assignment and send it to me, you're actually writing an assignment and sending it to the world and getting and interacting with your peer students, but also with a broader community. Again, this is this blurring the boundaries between in class and in life, right? This is another example from that Ulrike Top-Nogat presented in one of our workshops, in one of our symposia. This is a course that they designed using a very highly hybrid design, where you see the lecturers in essentially in the studio, but students were, some of them at home, some of them participated even while driving, and then at the end of the course, and each one of them brought their environment into the course. So it wasn't just from the studio broadcasting, this is where we are as teachers, but also show us the environment in which you learn, and let's reflect on the difference between the different environments in which we learn. Finally, the students had a final project which they presented in a public library. So again, blurring the boundaries between in course and in life. Finally, this is more of something that's closer to what I call a design pattern. This is a structure for designing a hybrid lesson. The idea is that instead of me, as I'm doing now, lecturing for 20 minutes, I record a task definition. It could be a video, or it could be a text document or some presentation, which again, it's a 10-minute task definition. Then students are broken up into groups and they work on this task in the group in 25 minutes. And then I allocate time slices, 10-minute time slices for each group. So the students get a video or a presentation which defines a task, they work, and then they get a 10-minute intensive discussion with me as a lecturer, which is actually much more effective use of that time. That's sort of a standard lesson time. I, as a lecturer, again, spend 10 minutes with each group rather than 45 minutes with the whole class, but again, making much more effective use of my time and theirs. I'll just quickly mention, and you can follow up on this later. We had a workshop in Denmark where we brought together a lot of experts and analyzed hybrid learning practices and extracted from a set of design patterns from them. And you can read the papers on that here. We had a workshop at the ECTL last year, and again, all the papers from that workshop are available online. And there's also a forthcoming book, which in a way is derived from that work, a special issue of BJET. So you can, and of course, a few links here. Thank you. That's me.